Hi guys, a warm welcome back to the Niels van Roij Design channel and of course Happy New Year. Welcome to a video on Arrival, a brand new maker of electric cars and actually quite a bit more stuff we're going to learn about in the video today. Enjoy!
Welcome to Arrival's R&D lab in Banbury in the UK. I'm Avinash, I'm the President and Chief Strategy Officer for the company. And what we're doing here is we're focused on commercial vehicle segment and producing best-in-class vehicles that have a similar price to fossil fueled ones and a lower total cost of ownership. We're focused on the commercial vehicle segment. That's a typically underserved segment that has really taken the same approach for the last 50 to 100 years. That is the typical approach of the industry, which is to manufacture in very large factories and ship those vehicles around the world. Now, the issue with that is, one is the price. As we're going electric, we're removing the fossil fuel powertrain and replacing it with an electric powertrain, and that's having a price premium to turning electric. The second is there's no flexibility in the design. And what you find in talking to commercial vehicle operators, that the way they use the vehicles actually changes depending on the local environment they're in. And at Arrival, we've managed to solve both of those problems. So we have an electric vehicle that is a similar and competitive price point to fossil fueled ones, but we're also able to manufacture them locally through these microfactories. So that means we're able to customize the vehicles and produce them at basically any volume and still maintain profitability.
He mentions a selection of very interesting things, and this project in a way reminds me of the Future London Taxi project I was honored to be part of right after graduating from the Royal College of Art in London, under the Hamlin Centre for Design in London. The taxi sadly was cancelled, so the project was killed, which happens a lot in the car industry, but obviously you don't hear about it that much because it's not the most glamorous story in the world. For the brands involved, for the people involved. But anyway, that project was cancelled. Nevertheless, the way that taxi would have been built, and this, by the way, was with a brand called Karzan from Turkey. So they provided the engineering platform and basically the funding for the project. They applied for the new New York taxi a couple of years ago with their dedicated platform, which was basically built like a bus, you could say, which is what he's talking about now. So rather than producing a vehicle with complex and very costly molds, for instance, the bonnet of like I say, a Mini, which is very curvaceous and very complex in its shapes. It cannot usually be pressed in one go, this bonnet, right? So you need a street, basically, of these presses. And depending on size and complexity, they are, hundreds and thousands of euros or pounds or dollars per press, per mold, and usually for bigger parts even more expensive. So the taxi was made in a similar way, where it was constructed, like I said, more or less like a city bus, which is like a Lego or Duplo building blocks, rather than big presses and complex systems. And they've now transferred that way of thinking to basically a car, a van, but nevertheless a way more compact vehicle. And this is very important, and they have managed to make it look rather attractive. Sure, it is a van, so it's a block, and the city bus that you just saw a moment ago in the introduction, of course, also is a block, but a very, very attractive one. And that is not very easy, especially not when you can't make use of these complex shapes and thus molds and the engineering tools behind it. So they truly managed to design, to style a vehicle with a very clear DNA. They have a clear DNA across their range of vehicles they already have now, or at least are in development of. So there's a small van here that UPS will also run, and their buses, they have a very distinctive look, very Arrival-ish. it's more product design than it is, let's say, automotive design, in the sense that they're not trying to make it look like something it is not. I've talked about this in previous videos too. This is a van, so it's not a high-speed, autobahn monster, so it doesn't have to look overly dynamic. So let's embrace the fact, let's make an honest design, let's embrace the fact that this is a van. It's made to ship packages, and it needs to be very useful for the driver behind the wheel, so there needs to be a lot of glass. This is something we focused on for the taxi as well. I can actually do a separate video on that. Now I'm thinking of it, all the stuff we did with the taxi and all the research we've done. So let me know in the comments below if you would like to hear more about that Future London Taxi project, and I'll share a lot of insights on the project if you find that interesting. But back to the Arrival. They, I'm sure, because I read a bit about it, focused around that driver, and not just the driver as in behind the wheel, but also how he or she would handle the packages in the back, getting in and out of the driver's position, but also in, let's say, the package space or the boot space, whatever you want to call it. So this is a very interesting project that I hope they will talk about in this video too. The breadth and the complexity of a project like this is enormous, and they've nailed it. So this is a school example of how to do it well. Everything. So it's the ergonomics, but it's also the brand DNA. It's the way of producing, localizing production. The materials that have been used, they basically nailed every single part that needs to be nailed. And compare this kind of stuff to other manufacturers that are doing low volume vans, especially for instance in the US, where obviously companies are a bit bigger, so they can design, so to speak, their own vans. I mean, they're absolutely hideous. They're horrendous. They don't function. They look ugly. They're not designed with love. Some of them have bumpers that are absolutely huge, sort of showing either I'm going to drive through everything, so get out of my way, or drivers are very incapable. They crash our vans all the time. So yeah, let's put on a very big black rubber bumper. Neither of these two visual messages are what you want, of course, as a company to communicate to the world through your van. And these vans are lovely. They have nice curvature, as you can see on the side of the car here, of the van. Also around their wheel wells, they're nicely sculpted. There are no straight corners. It's all double curved. So there's a lot of love in this box. And I'm really looking forward to this video and to see what they have to say about their Arrival work.
But at the same time provide our customers with the best-in-class product that's fit for purpose for their needs. Today we'll take you through how we do that. We'll show you the products, we'll show you our components, and how we get the cost down, and how we increase the innovation in the vehicle. And we'll show you our robotic cell, which is one of the enablers for the Microfactory. And you'll also get a first look at our composite plant. One of the ways we drive our costs down is through the use of these pioneering microfactories. So all of the technologies are designed upfront to be assembled using a low footprint, low capex microfactory. What's important about these microfactories is they can be deployed anywhere. You don't need any special buildings, you can use existing warehouses, and you can convert them to production plants very quickly. So this is actually a fundamental change to the way the industry is currently working, which are these large central factories. Ours is a distributed model, but what's key here is that everything is designed upfront to be assembled using these. And what's important is all of that passes through a software loop to validate that the microfactories can build any of our products. We have hundreds of people working in our robotics department creating these flexible robotic cells, and these cells form the backbone of the microfactory. In a typical plant, you have an assembly line, and if there's any change to the vehicle, you actually have to change the line, which is significant capex and time. In an Arrival microfactory, using these flexible cells, we're simply able to reprogram the order that the vehicle goes to each cell and the operations of the cell itself, and we can actually produce different variants. The benefits of this approach is immense. A typical factory will use thousands of robots to do production. At an Arrival microfactory, we use 70. Robotics have been used in the auto industry for a long time. But what's different about Arrival's approach is the flexibility that we have. So instead of pre-programming all the robots to operate in a certain way, we're able to configure and use computer vision to actually produce freedom in the cell. So for example, what I've just done is placed the part randomly on an autonomous mobile robot. And this is actually pretty significant. Instead of having to be precise in terms of where all the layouts of the parts will be for the robots to understand their process, I'm able to basically put it anywhere. And we use computer vision for the robots to track and perform the task. To enable the cost saving and the ability to produce our vehicles using microfactories, we have designed all of the components in-house. We're vertically integrated. So it's the hardware, the software, the robotics, it's all done within Arrival. And what you're seeing here is the type of components that we're building. So all of the high voltage and low voltage systems we design in-house. So that includes our modular battery, our BMS, traction inverter, DC-DC converter, human machine interface. These are all actually done within Arrival.
Again, just to touch on this is a pretty epic work, you know, to do everything in-house. In automotive, a lot of the stuff is actually done externally because it's so complex. So there are external experts for, you know, buying in seat systems, like, you know, for MPVs when seats fold flat. A lot of these are invented not within the brand, but are bought from a certain supplier and integrated in the design. So they truly started, you could say, with a white sheet of paper. Everything has been done in a fresh approach, in a new way.
Designing these in-house also enables us to upgrade the vehicle over time. So for example, with our HMI system, the human machine interface, if there's ever new technologies that come out, we're actually able to replace this component with the later version. That means all of our vehicles are also autonomous ready. Right now, the autonomous hardware cycle is on a 12 to 18 month refresh cycle, and the existing vehicle architectures can't deal with that. With Arrival, we're able to swap in and swap out those technologies as they become more mature. This approach prolongs the life of the vehicle and also saves the commercial vehicle operators cost in the fact that they can reuse the same.
Two things. One is I would like to quickly speak about the design of the car. But first, the point he mentions on fleet owners, basically, like for instance UPS or bus operators. That's really, really important, that it's easy economically to upgrade their machines along their life. And this, for instance, has been done for years within the aeronautics industry, right? A Boeing can well be 20 years old, but the flight deck is being upgraded to modern technology, and the structural pieces of the plane are actually that old, but the updates keep the plane, literally and figuratively speaking, in the air. That's a very different way of thinking, a different approach to making money, if you like, for the manufacturer, because most current day, let's say, manufacturers of vans, Ford with their Transit or Nissan with their NVs, in a way they would like you to replace your van every 3 or 5 years after the lease contract ends, for a newer one, a better one with whatever, better ergonomics or better economics, a more powerful and more efficient engine, etc., and a better human-machine interface. They have rethought this model and are thinking more, I would say, about the end customer rather than their own pockets in the first instance, which of course has the added benefit that later on their own pockets will be lined, because these type of customers will come back for another fleet, because after perhaps a longer period of time they are happier with the way at the end of the year the vehicles have done their job, so it's more economically viable to buy from Arrival rather than from any other manufacturer. So having said that, back to the design of the car, and what you can see here in this front 3/4 view, this very, very large greenhouse, so very large windows that wrap around, This obviously is a vehicle that will be mainly driven within cities, meaning that aerodynamics, which sort of come into play around 60 kilometers an hour, are not wildly important. Those vans will not all be on the highway usually. They are going to be in city centers. So having this very large frontal facade, if you like, that the air has to push against, or the van has to push through the air with, is a bit less important, but still you can see there's a plan view. So seeing it from the top, it's rounded basically, so the air can actually easily come around it. And of course the driver has a better visibility with these pillars being placed a bit more towards the back. Of course, the windows being low at the side, you can see them dropping down. It's easy to look down and out to little bollards or trees or parked bicycles, or actually people on bikes or whatever. So it's easier to maneuver this car into tight spaces. Very nice and friendly face with this focus around standard headlights. I'm sure they haven't developed them in-house. This must be like a Hella or anything they bought off the shelf, but it shows that even when you buy these cheap parts off the shelf, with making your own housing and creating this sort of brow of the window of the glass that gives this focus to the car, focus to the van. It's a new type of face, but it's also again, like I said earlier in this video, very recognizable for Arrival. The wheels sit very nicely into the body of the van, and as you can see, it curves around at the top and it curves around at the bottom. So rather than having this ugly sort of flatness that a lot of buses have, especially London buses. I lived in London for 10 years. These are absolutely the most hideous buses that any country makes, bar the so-called Boris bus, or the double-decker that was designed around the millennium. That had some qualities to it. It was a lot better than the normal buses in London, which are extremely slab-sided because they're absolutely straight, they're hideous, they're graphics, so the windows and wheels and frontal fascia are horrendously resolved. And here you can see that it's all very smartly done, and it just looks lovely. It's a nice, friendly, interesting little thing to see, and it's very well resolved. So very well done on the aesthetical level too.
Asset and upgraded over time. We're here in Arrival's composite factory, and what you're about to see here is one of the ways that we reduce the cost of an electric vehicle to help become competitive with fossil fueled ones. So to do that, we had to be vertically integrated, and we've looked at everything. So we've really questioned everything from the ground up. And what you're going to see here is what we're doing in terms of how we look at the materials that are used to make panels, which in the typical industry has been steel, and that's forced the requirement to have really large metal stamping plants and paint shops to be able to get to the fit and finishes of traditional vehicles. But what we're doing is something totally different and unique to the industry. So in terms of the production process, it comes off the roller, we laser cut it, and then through a series of robotic processes, we move it to trimming, molding, demolding, all done through robotics. When the panel then comes off, we've essentially got the shape and size that we need. So this is an example here of in-mold coating. So right off the mold, we're able to actually have this color inbuilt into the material. And what this means is that in the event that the vehicle gets scratched, for example, the color is actually part of the actual panel. So you don't have the typical scratches or scuff marks that you get, or paint that gets scratched off. So that means that the operator doesn't actually have to either respray this panel or even replace it. So that really helps the commercial vehicle operators reduce the total cost of ownership.
Before we let this lorry drive over this part, again, you can see this is proper car design or design prep, proper design. Rethinking everything, reducing costs for arrival themselves, not having to build plants that are wildly expensive and complex. The paint booth, let's say, or street in regular car factories. If you ever have the chance to visit one, please do so, because it's amazing to see. But it's wildly complex. It's extremely heavy on the environment, all the chemical processes taking place there. It takes an enormous amount of energy to paint a car, a very large amount of water. Obviously running these massive factories with hundreds or thousands even of robots, like he just mentioned, to press the metal with wildly heavy stamps. Again, it's wildly impressive to see. But also it's something that perhaps the industry has sort of invested in, and it's sort of the go-to place, the go-to way of doing it. We've done this for 100 years already, so we know what we're doing. But actually not having that burden of investing in massive plants and thus having to use them, fill them with new cars, rather than to say, okay, we have to write this all off and start all over again. They don't have this burden at arrival, so they can, much like Tesla did in the car industry, not having the burden of having to produce a lot of petrol engines, diesel engines, just to come out of the costs of billions of euros or dollars to develop these. You can start from fresh, a blank sheet of paper, and that's what I've done. And he just mentions a selection of examples, but I can mention even more on like I said, the production costs just dropping down, but also the environmental costs dropping down of a van built in this manner.
This is an example of a direct comparison between steel and the Arrival composite. And you'll see in the typical industry approach, when we drive the truck over it, you can see that the panel itself is significantly damaged, and this will require replacement. When you look at the Arrival composite, with the added durability that we get, you can see that the form is basically intact, and with a bit of cleaning, you'll be able to use that vehicle as you were before the accident. And what's really interesting about this material is not only is it really durable, it's also extremely light. So this becomes a key benefit to getting added range for the same size vehicle. Here you're seeing a van door, again using the same material, and you'll also see we're able to get Class A finishes with this.
Just for those amongst you who are not familiar with Class A, it's basically the visual parts on a car. So the outside skin of a door or a bonnet or a roof, which is absolutely perfect. It's tight, it's precise, there are no hubbles or bubbles. It's Class A surfacing. So you can see that they can do all of that within one mold too. So it has so many benefits, and it cuts out so many extra processes and costs that in the end everybody benefits from. So it's Arrival, it's their client like UPS or bus owner companies, whatever they're called, and in the end you as a client too. Getting into a bus that is cheaper to maintain will mean ticket prices will be lower, your package will be perhaps a bit cheaper to send over, so this benefits everybody. Really great thinking, really good work, and very nice to see somebody just explaining it without the bullshit bingo we see from so many car manufacturers. So this is a lot of good news in one short video.
So the same material can also be used in the interior, so we get the added benefit of using the same material both on the interior and exterior panels. This is an example of an interior liner that's basically done with the same material as well. Sustainability is a really important part of the Arrival ethos. And with this material, it was actually designed around sustainability in mind. So not only do you replace the panels less, which means you can extend the life of the existing panel, but when you do have to replace the panel, we can actually break them back down into their raw materials. We can use them as filler parts, or we can actually, using a chemical process, recycle them back all the way through the end of life, back to recreating new panels. So we use the same technologies that you see today, not just to make a van, but we also recently announced a bus.
So let's have a quick look at that bus from a little bit further away. because it's immediately apparent which brand this is. Just having had a look at their van, you see the same simple, clean lines, but this is not simple as in, you know, basic work. This is very well styled. You see the curvature around the corners. You see that the wheels are sitting very nicely in the body. You see how the body goes underneath the bottom of the bus, basically, rather than just being straight, like I said, these cheap London buses that are so hideous. This, even from this vast distance, we don't see anything else bar its rough proportions and a little bit of surfacing. You can already see this is just a solid piece of design. It feels like, rather than a piece of paper like these London buses, or a piece of sheet metal which has no thickness, if you like, visually, it feels like this solid, honed from one material kind of vehicle. Like I said, it sits beautifully on its wheels. The tires sit nicely on the rim, and then the tire nicely into the bodywork. It's not pushed in or out, obviously not out, but it sits nicely. It sits perfectly well. So very curious to see more details of this bus.
We also recently announced a bus, and this bus has really been designed all around the user experience, both for the driver, the passenger, but also the operators that use them. In driving down the cost, we've also ensured that these vehicles are also best-in-class vehicles.
It's nice to see the family together here, although they're slightly blurred out, but again, you could say that helps with showing how well they did their job. Very recognizable in their proportions. This wraparound, wrap-under body, the curvature on top of the body. This wraparound windscreen that then creates this visual brow, this focus for the headlights that are placed underneath in this sort of nice little cavity, eye socket around the front bumper. They truly have a character of their own. They proudly wear their badge in that little bit of curvature in between their eyes, let's say. The wraparound front glass too, so not just the visual of black wraparound glass, but actual wraparound glass has a lot of added benefits to the driver. He's likely going to say something about the large doors that I saw in the side view of the bus. Rather than two doors, there's a lot more glass, so there's a lot more light inside of the interior. It's easier to get in and out of the car. Something that reminds me of the London taxi project that I just referred to. I could say something about in the next video. But anyway, let's continue again with Arrival.
So for example, the van, compared to its competitive set, it has better payload and it has better cargo volume for the same size vehicle. The bus has advanced safety features. It has a fully flat floor for passengers to be able to get in and out really easily. And it's a modular design, so we can quickly change the shapes to enable different local variants. Thanks everyone, it's been my pleasure to show you the inside of the Arrival Microfactory and take you through some of the unique things that we're doing in this industry.
Well, it has been my pleasure to have a look at these vehicles, and I think there's a lot more to say around the Arrival brand, around their products. He sadly didn't mention the large doors that you can just see in this image here. So if you find this brand interesting, please let me know in the comments. Let me know what it is that you're interested in, if it's their design or their engineering perhaps, or the human-machine interface or anything else. Because if enough people say something about this brand, which I think is widely interesting, because yeah, the fantastic work that they've shown already in this short video, I'll be happy to make another video about it. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoy 2022, and I'll see you for the next video. Cheers!